I gained the ability to be present and pay attention to the little joys in life that I would have previously not been able to notice or appreciate because I would have been so in my head about food in my body.
Welcome to Shoulders Down, a podcast about intuitive eating and living. I'm your host, Leah Kern, and I'm an anti-diet dietitian and certified intuitive eating counselor. In this podcast, you will learn to harness your body's innate wisdom to govern not just how you eat, but also how you live. It is my mission to help you heal your relationship with food and body so you can live your most aligned and fulfilling life. Welcome, and I'm so glad that you're here. Hello, and welcome back to Shoulders Down. This week we have a different interview situation happening. So a long time, maybe like 6 months ago, maybe more, I was on a friend and colleague's podcast. Her name is Molly Seifert. She is a body image coach, and she is actually the guest coach inside of my one-to-one nutrition counseling program, the Embodied Method. My clients all get a deep dive with Molly so that they get expert eyes on their body image journey. And she's awesome. She's amazing. I cannot say enough good things about Molly. I absolutely love working with her, and she's just such a beautiful part of the Embodied Method one-to-one program. So I'm so grateful for her. So she has a podcast called What She Gained, which is about what you gain in life when you achieve body peace and body confidence and intuitive eating status. And I had the pleasure of being on her podcast a few months ago. And recently, a bunch of people from this audience have been asking about my story. They want to hear me share my story because I have had my own journey healing from a disordered relationship with food and body. And I realized that I haven't kind of like told my story from A to Z. So I was thinking about, okay, where have I told my story before in like an interview setting? And I tell my story on this podcast episode with Molly. So the episode you're about to hear is reposted from Molly's podcast. So Molly's actually interviewing me this time around. And we talk about not only my relationship with food and my story, but we also talk about beyond intuitive eating. We talk about intuitive living and how when you start to eat intuitively, it inevitably overflows into living intuitively. And we share some awesome client stories, stories from personal life about how this work has had ripple effects into living intuitively, which is, in my opinion, one of the coolest parts of doing this work. So I'm so excited for you to hear that episode. I think it's kind of like a fun role reversal that I'm the one being interviewed this week. And I also want to share that I do plan to share more in depth about my story eventually in a solo episode on the podcast. Just right now, I figured this was a great starting point since I already share my story on this episode. But there definitely will be a time in the future where I kind of go more deeply from A to Z, giving the details of my story. And I will likely poll my Instagram audience before then to make sure that I capture any questions you might have about my story, because I want to make sure to kind of tackle everything. But this is a great overview. I certainly give a ton of information about my story that I don't often share the whole thing A to Z. So excited for you to hear that. Before diving into this week's episode, I want to share a pretty massive life update with you. So I am moving. I'm moving across the country, which is a pretty big deal for me because I am very much a East Coast gal. I grew up in New Jersey. I went to college in Vermont, and I currently have been living in Brooklyn, New York for the last 3+ years. So this is pretty huge for me. I'm moving to Northern California with my partner, Al. And if you want to learn more about him and specifically our relationship through the context of the work that I do, intuitive eating and intuitive eating in relationships specifically, you can check out my episode on the podcast with him. We had him on, and it was a super fun time to share some more of my personal life with this community. So we are moving in a few months. The exact dates aren't nailed down yet. But I wanted to share with you, one, to keep you kind of in the loop on a pretty big change in my life. And also because there'll be a period of time where we'll be like in transit, driving across the country and kind of taking our time, visiting some family along the way. And during that time, I will have a smaller client caseload just because, so it's manageable with travel. So what that means for you is that, this month, the month of October, is the last month that I'll be accepting a full case of one-to-one clients. So that means that if you've been thinking about working together in the Embodied Method one-to-one nutrition counseling program, now is your time to apply. It's not that I won't be taking new clients in a few months. It's just that the opportunities will become much more limited just so that I can manage this giant cross-country move. I'm going to have to whittle down my client caseload so that I have the bandwidth to continue serving my clients at full capacity and also handle the things going on in my personal life with the move. So I want to lovingly share with you that if you've been thinking about working together for some time, right now is a really, really beautiful time to start the Embodied Method because it is a 4-month program, which means that when we start working together now, you have support through the holidays, through Thanksgiving, through the winter holidays, through New Year's, which can be some of the most triggering times when it comes to diets, your relationship with food, diet talk, body image, seeing a bunch of family members or friends you haven't seen in a while, having to attend all of these functions, or you have to find clothes that you feel good in. All of these things can really bring up a lot of hard things when it comes to your relationship with food and body. So it would be my absolute honor to get to support you through this time. If you have questions, if you're like, I don't really know if the Embodied Method is the right fit for me, do not hesitate to email me or shoot me a DM if you follow me on Instagram. I would absolutely love to answer any of your questions. And when you apply, we schedule a free 45-minute discovery call. So there's plenty of time to really make sure that this is the right fit for you. And something that I always like to share is if it's not the right fit for you, I am someone who highly values integrity. And I'll tell you that. Like, I will tell you, I don't feel this is right for you. And I really want to make sure that you have the most success and you do the thing that is most supportive of your healing and your progress. So in that spirit, I will never push you into something that I don't feel would serve your needs. So just a few spots open for the month of October. And again, after this month, there will be limited. The opportunities to work together will become more limited because of this huge life shift that is on the horizon. And I will share with you more as it gets closer, as the details unfold. But for now, I'm going to be a West Coast girl in a few months. I can't believe it. Yeah, that's all I'll share for now. So excited to venture on this new journey. Okay, so before we get into today's podcast episode, we're going to answer a listener question. So today's listener question comes from Amy, and she asks, someone I know struggles with diet culture and is trying to break free. She doesn't think she's getting enough veggies in her diet, so she wants to take the powder supplements to make sure she's getting enough nutrition. I've always thought supplements aren't effective and you just pee your money out, but maybe I'm just biased against them. Thoughts? Okay, Amy, amazing question. Love this topic. Before I dive into the answer, I'm just going to give my standard disclaimer here, which is that all content in this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only. The information and education provided is not intended to supplement or replace professional medical treatment, advice, and or diagnoses. On top of that, I'm only one person with one lived experience, so I encourage you to seek out insights from folks with other lived experiences, as well as consulting your own inner wisdom. So Amy, love this question, and it's something that comes up a lot, right? Let's just take a step back before we even dive into the specifics of this question and unpack a little bit about of information that's crucial to know in the supplement conversation. So supplements, very importantly, are not regulated the same way as food and drugs. So the supplement world has kind of a policy where they don't have to prove that the supplement is effective before the supplement hits the market. They also don't have to go through rigorous testing to prove that the supplement is even safe before it hits the market. Now, when I learned this in undergrad, I can remember the exact class I was in, where I was sitting. It shocked me. It's horrifying, right? Like there's many cases where there's been supplements that have been shown to become dangerous, and then they were pulled from the market only after they had done a lot of harm. So unlike drugs, supplements don't have to be shown as safe or effective before hitting the market, which to me is just like, how is this going on? Like it feels so scary. So supplements absolutely aren't like as harmless as they might be made out to be in your like Instagram targeted ads or whatever it is. So that is the first thing to know. The next thing is that diet culture's marketing, more specifically like wellness culture, which I would say is a subset of diet culture that specifically focuses on health and purity and eating clean instead of focusing on weight loss. But at the end of the day, it's still kind of moralizing food, creating this hierarchy where there are some good foods, there are some bad foods. And at the end of the day, it's registering as restriction to your body, which is effectively the same experience as a diet. So wellness culture in recent years has really increased in popularity, and supplements are often a big part of their messaging and their marketing, and of course, their money, how they make money. So it's important to know that the marketing around, like, you could have gaps in your diet and like, you know, you brain fog, or like you could be experiencing these like vague subset of symptoms. You might be needing a supplement to help fix this. This marketing is very intentional because it sets them up for the perfect springboard to be like, and we have the supplement for you. So remember that so much of diet culture and wellness culture, which is part of diet culture, as far as I'm concerned, comes down to needing to convince you that your body, your current lifestyle, that something's missing, that you need to buy something to fully achieve this like picture of health that's being fed to you. Now, when they convince you of this, it makes for an easy sell, right? Like here's a supplement. So I would say, hearing your question, it sounds to me like this person in your life is really just a victim of this marketing and this messaging, where she's really believing that she's not getting enough veggies in her diet, so she needs to take powder supplements to make up for it. So that's the first thing, is like having compassion for this human being. And like the reason she ended up in this situation likely has a lot to do with the diet culture messaging and propaganda that she's been steeped in, that we're all constantly being steeped in, unfortunately. So the next piece here is looking at, like, is there any truth to this? Is a supplement, like a powder supplement, what did you say? She wants to take the powder supplements to make sure she's getting enough nutrition. Okay. Is this necessary? Is there ever a case in which it's necessary? So in general, kind of like standard nutrition recommendations is to get your nutrients from food. And the reason for that is because our bodies have evolved to absorb nutrients from food for many, 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 many years, right? This is how our from an evolutionary standpoint, this is how our systems have evolved. Whereas supplements, like absorbing nutrition from something like a supplement, is a relatively new thing. So in sort of like the human landscape history. So what this means is that like we're not as well equipped to handle or to extract nutrition from something like a supplement as it's in like the synthetic form. And the reason for this is because like there is a certain synergy happening in food that we don't even fully understand. So it's very difficult to then isolate that into a capsule, into a supplement. For example, like take an apple, right? Like apples have vitamins and minerals. I mean, all foods have vitamins and minerals. But just for example, take an apple. Say we were trying to replicate the nutrition of an apple in a supplement. It's very difficult to do that because we don't even fully understand all of the ways in which the vitamins and the minerals and the phytochemicals, and the fiber and like all of the different components interact in order to have this high level of nutrient absorption from that food. So, generally speaking, as humans, we're much better equipped to absorb nutrients from food sources as opposed to supplements. That's not to say that supplements can't like fill in the gaps, especially in the case of like, I'm thinking a folic acid supplement in pregnancy or a vitamin B12 supplement in the case of, not having meat in your diet. Absolutely. Supplements can have a role in filling in gaps in the diet. There are these like very real indications for supplements in some cases, something like, a person who their labs are showing vitamin D deficiency. Okay. They might need extra support. Some people have trouble absorbing vitamin D. And so something like a vitamin D supplement can absolutely work well. Some supplements have been studied more and there's more kind of backing the efficacy. But in the case of what it feels like to me, it seems like to me that you're referring to in your question about this person in your life is these more like modern trendy supplements, right? Like I'm thinking Athletic Greens. I'm thinking, what's the one I always hear on the podcast I listen to? Ritual. Yeah, Ritual. These like multivitamins, these kind of like non-specific general vitamins to quote unquote like fill in the gaps in your diet. These are the ones that I find often get a little bit more kind of sketchy in terms of like efficacy and like, is this even really doing anything? These are the cases when I would say that these supplements probably aren't really necessary at the end of the day. They're super expensive. And if possible, using that money to instead, maybe purchase a more variety of foods or, maybe using that money to invest in some kind of cooking class to help you learn different ways to cook a variety of foods, which might help you, enjoy them more, or investing in, a kitchen gadget that would maybe make you more interested in eating a variety of foods. In my opinion, any of those things are likely better investments than some of these like trendy supplement powders or capsules or whatever they may be. The other issue I take with like a lot of these things like Athletic Greens and these like trendy nutrition supplement multivitamins that you might see, for example, in your targeted ads on Instagram, is that they often have this kind of like elitist energy to them, right? Like they're often like very expensive or being touted by influencers from primarily privileged backgrounds. And oftentimes too, they're like conveniently being advertised by folks in small bodies, which is not like, it's not like the advertising is directly saying like, if you drink Athletic Greens, I'm like really clearly have opinions about Athletic Greens. Then it's not like overtly saying, if you drink Athletic Greens, you will look like the person advertising these Athletic Greens. However, that's the underlying message, right? Like it's often, a person in a smaller body who's considered like conventionally attractive, holding up the powder, mixing the thing in this like cute, perfect workout matching outfit, which just to me upholds this idea that like health has to look a certain way. It has to look like, this person in a smaller body and this person who wears this kind of like high-end athleisure attire and all these things, when that is not the case at all. So that's another bone I have to pick with these types of supplements that it sounds like you're referring to in this question. I feel like I'm getting off topic of the question, but I think I just like have a lot of pent up feelings about these supplements that I want to get out, because it is related to this question. So at the end of the day, Amy, you asked my thoughts on supplements, and here's a summary of my thoughts are they're often not necessary, especially in the case of these like non-specific, vitamin powders or vegetable powders to quote unquote fill in the gaps. Often these powders or these capsules are not as well absorbed as food forms of nutrition. So for that reason alone, your money is probably better spent on food. And on top of that, I want to be crystal clear that I'm not saying there's never a place for a supplement in one's diet. There are absolutely cases that are much more well researched where supplements can be really, really effective and even like completely life changing. For example, with pregnant women, we know that lack of folic acid in during pregnancy can result in neural tube defects in the child. So something like a folic acid supplement, which is in like a prenatal vitamin, can be truly crucial. So I'm absolutely not here to say, supplements are never necessary. I am here to say that often the effects of them or the promised outcomes are overblown in the media, specifically in the case of this like trendy subset of supplements that we're seeing now in the wellness culture / diet culture, such as things like athletic greens, even like collagen and other kind of like vegetable powder, that kind of thing. So I hope that's helpful for you. If you have a question of your own that you'd like to submit for a chance to have it answered on an upcoming episode, you can submit that question via the link in the show notes. Also, I want to shout out right now that I have a post on Instagram about these like targeted ads that often, I literally talk about athletic greens in it. It's a reel. So, if you want to hear a little bit more about this topic, you can either DM me on Instagram or you can check my Instagram reels and kind of scroll back a little. You could find it that way. Or you can send me an email and I'd be happy to connect you to that content. Okay. So without further ado, here is the episode where I am being interviewed on someone else's podcast, Molly Seifert, and I'm re-airing it right now. I hope you enjoy.
All right. I am so excited to have Leah here today. We are going to be having a juicy conversation about intuitive living. So let me introduce Leah and then we'll dive in. Leah Kern is an anti-diet registered dietitian who specializes in helping people heal their relationship with food and body through the framework of intuitive eating. In her private practice, Leah teaches her clients to harness their body's innate wisdom to govern how they eat and live. Oof, I love that. Leah believes that the work involved in unraveling years of conditioning and diet culture and learning to come home to one's body is deeply spiritual work, and she treats it as such. Food and body image concerns take up precious mental real estate. It is Leah's mission to help her clients heal their relationship with food and body so they can finally live their most aligned and fulfilling lives without being bogged down by incessant food thoughts. Leah, welcome. I'm so excited to have you.
So excited to be here, Molly. I always love chatting with you.
I know. We have formed such a beautiful relationship, I feel like, over the past year. I loved working together and being in community together. It has just been so fun. And I feel like this intro really embodies you. Like you are deeply spiritual, but also I just want to say like you're so down to earth as well. I think sometimes people hear spiritual and they're just like, okay, this is going to be woo woo or whatever. But you're not. You're both, right? Like you're deeply spiritual and deeply grounded. And I just feel like it's such a beautiful combination.
Thank you for saying that. Yeah, a bio is such like a funny thing because you have to capture yourself in a set of words. But I read it over right before I sent it to you and I was like, that does feel true to me. Like, cool.
Yes. Oh, I love that. And I love that because that's kind of what we're going to be talking about today is like this intuitive living and how do we get that answer of like, does this feel true to me? Right. And for you and I, that's like kind of the work that we do. And so that feels natural to us now, which is just such a beautiful thing. And we're going to dive into that more. But I would love for you to just kind of introduce yourself, tell your story, whatever version of it you'd like to tell, long, short, medium, just so people can get to know you a little bit better.
Yeah, of course. I love sharing my story because it is such a huge part of why I do the work that I do. So I think my story starts just like a lot of people's. To me, it kind of starts in high school, which is a time when, I think I was like most of us, pretty susceptible to any kind of like messaging, marketing, because, you just want to fit in. And I actually was just talking to someone about this the other day. I can trace like the onset of my sort of like obsessive relationship with food very clearly to, I mean, it's a billion things, right? It's not one book or something, but I can kind of like trace the main catalyst very clearly. So I would say I was humming along like everyone, eating, following my body's cues, like living blissfully in the dark of the world of diet culture until high school. And then, certain messaging comes along and, you decide that you want to try to manipulate the size or shape of your body. So you start trying to like figure out what is the best way to do that. And I think at the time I was like understanding that dieting was bad and not in alignment with who I was. So I tried to like shove it under the guise of healthy eating, and told myself, oh, that's better. Like, this isn't about weight. This is about health. But it was fully about weight. Like, obviously it was fully about weight. And so I it dabbled in never really a formal diet, but just sort of like my own set of rules and restrictions that were like my own like little diet. Essentially, it wasn't called anything, it wasn't called keto or paleo, but it was just essentially the same thing, because rules and restrictions are rules and restrictions. And the book that was the main catalyst to like kind of push me into the throes of it was well, I really never talk about this book because I don't want anyone to know about it or read it, but in this context it's important. So there's this book called Eat to Live by this guy Dr. Joel Furham, which is a whole other issue with like doctors not having a lot of nutrition education and that being really problematic. And he pretty much, the premise of the book is like, you should eat to live. Like, simply, you should just eat nutrient dense food to live. Like, food is fuel. Why would you eat for any other reason? And it just completely ignores the social implications of food, the spiritual, ritualistic, like any of these other parts of why a person might eat. And it makes you feel really guilty if you would want to have, the message it's saying without saying is like, if you want to eat for pleasure, like, what's wrong with you? Like, you still crave sugar? Like, what? Like, and I'm reading this book, like, my body is a temple. Like, I should only crave kale and quinoa. But like deep inside, that was going against what I was experiencing. I was like 16 years old, and like, fun foods were everywhere. And I felt like, I should just like easily be able to abstain because like I read this book, and like I shouldn't crave anything that's like not perfectly nutrient dense. So did not have like the understanding of like the problems with this book obviously back then, but looking back I can really see that the problem with his main message in the book is a problem we see a lot, which is so diluted, and the message is so oversimplified in a way that really misses the mark on other really equally, as if not more important, parts of eating.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, of course, I feel like Leah and I are always finding like more ways that we're like randomly connected. But yeah, I mean that like when you said like I should only be craving kale and quinoa, like that really resonates with me. And I think it'll resonate with a lot of people. Like, and there's something wrong with you if you crave something sweet or salty or anything outside of the realm of kale and quinoa. And then we fall into this cycle of second guessing ourselves and this deep shame and guilt and regret. And it just snowballs.
Right. Exactly. So now it's like, I'm being dishonest with myself because I'm telling myself all the time that I don't crave those things. And I'm painting this like false picture of like being the healthy one. Like, any of my friends in high school, my family members would have said like, oh, she was just healthy, like, and on top of that, I'm experiencing this like intense shame because the story I'm putting out is not matching with what's going on behind closed doors. Like, I'm having like episodes of feeling out of control, like ending up at the kitchen island every night, like dipping pretzels in Nutella. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it was many episodes of eating past the point of comfortable fullness, even though it was supposed to be just eating the kale and quinoa and feeling like, oh, my body is a temple, I can easily abstain from anything else. So I think the second layer that made it such an uncomfortable time was, I mean, on so many levels. One, I'm physically uncomfortable because I'm riding this like binge restrict roller coaster. And the other piece is like, I was not living in line with my authentic self. I was putting out this message of like who I thought I was supposed to be, like this like healthy, perfect kind of eater. But the reality was it wasn't feeling easy, and I wasn't feeling like natural. It was feeling just forced and uncomfortable. And there was so much shame about it not feeling the way it was supposed to.
Yeah. And I resonate with that so much. And I'm going to ask you a question, but I don't even know exactly the answer about that part of my life for me. So this is also kind of like a curious question for me. But what was the feeling that you got that told you that you were out of alignment?
Yeah, it's such a good question. I mean, it never was like clear to me that that's what was happening until I'm looking at it with all of this time to understand so much about this, and with a 6-year nutrition education and with a lot of context and understanding about diet culture and how it works. So it's so hard to say. In the moment, I really don't think I ever was like, this is out of alignment. I didn't even have that language. I didn't even know that that was like a
Right.
possible thing. I was 16. I was just like, what? And
Right.
I would say it was more so like, so kind of fast forwarding a little, once I got to college, a big like light bulb moment for me. First of all, I decided to study nutrition because I was like, I read this book. I'm going to perfect my diet. I'm going to study it for 4 years, which is like in the book Anti Diet by Christy Harrison, another intuitive eating dietitian. Like she talks about how diet culture is like so powerful that it could literally change your career path, like grab hold of you and like make you want to be a health coach when maybe like that's not what you actually want it to be.
Yeah.
It's not that you know what I mean? Like
I'm
how
laughing because that's what happened to me.
I kind of remember you sharing that. Yeah, and in the book, she like restricted food to the point where she ends up being a food writer just because she was so obsessed with food because it was so restricted. So it's just
Mm,
interesting how your career path could literally be decided by your disordered eating.
right. Oof. Yeah. Yeah. I'm just like letting that soak in because it just really shows us how pervasive diet culture is and how sneaky powerful it is. Looking back on my experience, you experienced this like out of alignment feeling way younger than I did. I was in grad school when this started to happen to me. And thinking about the question I asked you and what my answer would be is I think I just felt unhappy. I was like,
Mm,
I'm quote unquote doing all the right things, right? Like I'm in grad school. I'm gonna, advance my career. I was in a different career then. I'm gonna, be really successful. I have a partner and I run half marathons and I'm doing all the right things, but I didn't feel happy. And I
mm,
think that was kind of both an impetus for dieting harder, but then also when that didn't help anymore, that was kind of a breaking point for me. I was like, I'm not happy. What is going
right.
on? And the listeners might resonate with that as well, because I think it
Yeah.
is like in the moment, you're like, I don't know what's happening. I don't
Yeah.
understand.
Yeah, Molly, I love the idea of it being kind of like as simple as that, like happiness being sort of like the litmus test for if you're acting in alignment with your intuition. I mean, that's not to say like every time you act in alignment with your intuition, you're going to be happy because
Oh, yeah.
sometimes it's hard. But I think in the long run, you will feel better. Like if you're having, making a boundary or having like a hard call, it's not like you always feel like immediately happy, but sort of like the general mood of your life will feel that way, as you continue to follow your intuition.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love this because that's what we're here to talk about today, right? Is like,
Yeah.
how do we get to that place? So I usually ask this question at the end of the podcast, but I'm going to ask at the beginning because I think it's more appropriate today. And the question is, what did you gain in your life when you stopped obsessing about food and your body?
I love the question so much. I would say I gained, most simply put, the ability to be present and pay attention to all of the little joys in life that I would have previously not been able to notice or appreciate because I would have been so in my head about food in my body. It's these things like, enjoying like laying in grass or like, the wind on my face or like just like a really nice connected time with a friend. These like things that feel kind of just small, but aren't small at all, or even something like, I mean, right now I live in New York City and I'm like constantly taking the subway and I like to just like listen to people and kind of like glean and pay attention. I'm really into journaling and just kind of like challenging myself to like notice things about life, to like be an active part of my life. And those are the kind of things where I wouldn't have had the mental capacity to notice something funny or inspiring that, I overhear someone say in the streets or on the subway, because I would have been running that, incessant stream of like, okay, I had this and that, that when I get home, like, does that mean I can have that? Well, okay, if I have that, then I have to do this to make up for it. And there would have been no space to get to observe life and enjoy just like those little those little beauties and novelties that would otherwise slip through the cracks.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is you really gained a presence and an appreciation for life.
Totally. And
Yeah.
it used to bother me. Like, I'd be with friends who, looking back, like, it's not that being an intuitive eater like makes their life perfect by any means, but I would be with friends who didn't struggle in this way, and they would be like, I had this sense that they were reaping more joy out of life than me, and that felt like it felt hard because I'm like, "Wait, you actually, like, wanna go to this party and drink?" Like, in college, I'm like, "That sounds so scary and upsetting to me," and then, like, at the party, like, "Oh, you seem like you can let loose so much," or, "You actually wanna, like, go get, like, ice cream?" Like, that sounds horrifying to me, but, like, here you are, like, licking your cone of ice cream and, like, seeming so joyful, so I think
Yes.
I kind of had that sense of, like, I'm not experiencing life to the fullest, I'm not reaping the most joy out of my life,
Yes.
and that was part of, I think, also what kinda, like, propelled me forward to find this new way of relating to food and relating to life.
Yes, I love that and definitely relate to that in a big way because yeah, I also felt like I wasn't like getting the joy out of life that I wanted. And I was watching a movie yesterday and I don't remember what it's called because I'm the worst at remembering those things. But there was a quote in there that really stood out to me. This man was having kind of like a little almost a little bit of a break and this other person said, you know, they always say life is short, and it is, but it's also the longest thing you'll ever do. And
Mm,
that really hit me, right? It's like we both have to like realize that like we're only here for a short period of time, and also it's the longest thing that we do. So I don't know about you, but I want to be as human as possible during that time, and I want to be able to get as much joy out of that. But I think with the joy, we also have to be able to hold space for the other end of that, right? Like the discomfort, the sadness, the grief, all those
mm,
things that come with it. And so I think that's one thing that I've really gained in this process is the skill of learning how to hold space for the discomfort. Because when I was dieting, it was really an attempt at feeling more comfortable and trying to avoid the discomfort. Um, and so I'm with you. Like the joy is bigger, and I'm sure you will agree with this. The joy is bigger, and also that doesn't mean it's perfect. You've said that multiple times, right? And we've learned how to hold space for the discomfort.
totally. I love this point. I actually think it's something that's not spoken about enough, sort of like the why behind dieting, like, why is it so attractive to humans? Like, and I love what you're sharing. It's like it's easier to obsess over what you've eaten in the day, to count calories, to count points, to focus on the time, time slot in the day that you can be eating. It's easier to deal with all of those things than it is to face like the impending doom of like, the human existence or, like
Yeah.
really hard emotions or, issues like deep like issues within yourself. So I love that you say that it yes, it allows you to experience more joy in life, but also to feel more of the hard emotions, which is so human to get to experience the spectrum, the whole spectrum of human emotions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's been my biggest gain from, letting go of food and body obsession is I see myself as so human. And
Mm,
there's still things that I struggle with, right? Like I was just talking to my partner yesterday. I don't even remember. Oh, I was talking about like how I am always telling myself I should create a ritual for myself, even if it's just like a 5-minute thing where I'm reflecting. And I do it throughout the day in little spurts, but like I don't have a moment where I sit down and do it and I have this daily routine. And I have this story that I should be doing this, right? Sometimes I'll do things for a short period of time and I had to remind myself in that moment of shooting myself so hard that I'm human,
yeah,
right? And it's okay
yeah,
to not have this ritual that everyone else has and it's okay.
totally, totally.
So
But I want to tell you something quickly, Molly, because I haven't shared this with you. Like you once, I asked about something, like I forget the context, and you were like, not sure yet. Like you're like, I do everything by the seat of my pants,
yeah.
and that was so freeing to me because I tend to be that way too, and I actually think, um, I've kind of, like, done some mindset work around, like, reframing that as a bad thing. It's like, "Oh, last minute," versus, like, just following what feels good in the moment. But you made it okay for me to do things by the seat of my pants in business, like,
Mm.
at least, um, because ever since you said that, like, and you said it so casually, I was like, "Oh, like, that doesn't have to be, like, the wrong way."
Yeah. Oh, that's so nice that that impacted you so deeply because
It did.
I still sometimes am like, man, Molly, you gotta get more organized and all this stuff. So that's really, it's a good reminder for me too that like, yeah, it's okay to do that. And it felt okay in that context for sure, but it doesn't feel okay for me in every context to fly by
Right,
the
for
seat of my
sure.
pants, to be fully transparent. But it's just a good reminder that like, us being where we are can be so inspiring to other
Yes.
people.
Yes,
Yeah.
and being in your truth and sharing what's true for you can set other people free.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I think that's why this work is so powerful to kind of circle it back to what we're talking about today is that when you are able to be your authentic self, stand in your power, take ownership for yourself and your life, people notice. Like I have had so many clients who are like, they're, you know, they've given up food obsession, they've done intuitive eating, they're learning to accept their bodies, and they're feeling that big joy now. Like they're feeling aligned with themselves and their authenticity. And people are like, you look great. What are you doing?
Yeah,
Right. And they're like, I'm
yeah,
literally just being myself. So it's like, it's not, I'm not saying that just because of the physical aspect, but people can tell when you're being unapologetically yourself. And it is so inspiring. So I'd love to hear some stories of yourself, like how you've seen intuitive eating shift you into this intuitive living, and also some of your clients, and then I'll share some of my stories as well.
yeah, definitely. So, I think to kinda, like, back up a step, it's like we kind of alluded to the fact that dieting is just it's a very numbing experience. You're not feeling emotions, you're not facing things, you're using it to cope. And then when you start the work of intuitive eating, I mean, it's connecting to your body through the lens of food cues, hunger, fullness cues. But how I kind of like to explain that is it's like once I think of it like a sleeping animal in a cave. Like when you're dieting, there's this animal that's asleep in a cave inside of you, and that animal is your human intuition. And when you stop dieting and start connecting to your intuition, like slowly you kind of like are jolting it awake inside of you. And once it wakes up to govern, once you start using that creature inside of you to govern, your eating behaviors, like he or she or whatever you want to call your creature. For some reason I want to call mine he's awake. Like he's awake in there, and he's not just going to speak to you and communicate with you about governing your eating behaviors. He's also going to speak to you about governing, friendships that feel good, jobs that feel good, relationships, decisions, big life decisions, jobs. So it's kind of like the saying, like, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. Like once you establish that connection with your intuition, it's out there, and it becomes more clear when you're acting out of alignment with your intuition, because it's like this pathway is sort of like awakened within you. So
Mm.
to the question of in my personal life, I think it's so hard for me to think about like specific things, but I would say in general, when I started becoming an intuitive eater, I think that opened the door for me to feel when things felt wrong to me. Like when I'd be
Mm.
around a friend and then, like, I'm like, okay, this person's like really making me contract and like not expand. Okay, noted. Like, interesting. Like that was like a nuance of level of feeling that I could not tap into before doing this work, because I was just like always living what I say to my clients, shoulders up, all in the head. It was all the mental gymnastics. I never lived shoulders down, like in my body. I could never feel like a tightness in my chest, or, like those kind of like energetic feelings that happen in the whole body.
I love all those analogies. I'm such a sucker for analogies.
Me too.
I love this image of this like bear or creature, just like it's been hibernating because we were ignoring it, right? So it was just like, all right, well, I'll just go in my little hole. But once you awaken it again, it stays open. You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. I love that. I love that saying. This happened to me just this weekend. I was feeling some feelings about my relationship with my partner. And I was like, no, like it'll be fine. This is just a season. It'll pass. Like we don't have to talk about it. It's fine. And it literally was like, nope, I have to talk about it. We have to have a conversation. There's no point ignoring it and saying it's going to pass. Yes, saying it's going to pass. That's true. Like it was a season, like we're both going through some stressful times, but there was just this voice inside of me that I was like, no, that's not aligned. It's more aligned to have this conversation. Yes, it will be uncomfortable. Even though it wasn't a confrontation or a fight, it was just me sharing my feelings. I am always a crier, no matter what it is.
Me too.
My poor therapist was like, one time when I first started working with her, she was like, I'm noticing like some big emotions come up here. I was like, real honestly, I'm just going to cry every session. So like it's not really attached to any particular story. Like it's just going to happen. So anyway, it's like, I tend to want to avoid conversations because I know I'm just going to cry. Yeah. And I'm finally just at that point where I'm like, no, I need to have this conversation. And lo and behold, we had the conversation. I shared my feelings. He held space for me and I felt closer to him. It was like, duh, Molly.
Yeah,
like your body is so wise. And I think you hit the nose on the head in that like intuitive eating is really a doorway, a portal to the rest of the connection with your body to live shoulders down. I love that. There's nothing wrong with living like your head. Like your head is useful too, right? But
totally.
Your body also has so much wisdom, and reconnecting with your body in terms of food cues and nourishing ourselves through food is such a beautiful way to start because it's something we have to do. Like literally we need food to live.
Right. I think it's such a beautiful entryway to this deeper level of being able to use your body's cues for other things. And I love the story you share about like that circumstance where you had a truth to speak with your partner and it was so clear to you that you had to say that, in that moment. And I think that that's back to the question of like, what have I gained from this work? I think that that in the past, it's like something would have happened. Maybe it would have like vaguely made me feel weird, but I wouldn't have had like the understanding and the connection with my body to name it and understand it. And then maybe like a bunch of time would go by and then maybe I would like be mulling over it and then realize, oh, I actually have to like speak up about this or do like, have an action here that's going to help me feel better. And I would say that as a result of becoming an intuitive eater and having this access to my intuition to govern my life, that time period of how long it takes to understand, oh, I'm feeling something, oh, what does this mean? Okay, I'm going to act on it, has shortened so much. Like it's almost to the point where it's like reflexive. Okay, this made me feel this way. I've had this feeling before because I have, a clear understanding of my body's cues and I know what to do.
Yeah, I love that. And I think to kind of make everyone listening understand that it was a process to get there, right? Like it wasn't just like, oh, now it's instant. I understand my feelings and here's what I have to do. Like I've been loving using this analogy lately. It's like lifting weights, right? If you want to be able to deadlift 400 pounds, right? You're not going to walk into the gym and be able to lift 400 pounds, right? So same thing here. If you want to be able to live intuitively, know that it's a muscle you have to flex, right? You have to do the work of being able to put language to the things you're feeling. You're going to, even before that, then you're going to have to be able to connect to the shoulders down part. Like, am I feeling something? What does that feel like? Where is it in my body? What could that possibly mean, right? Then putting language to it, then aligning with your needs and values. Like there's so many steps to get there. And so I guess that would be my next question then is like, where would people start, right? Where can people start to connect? We've already talked about like, yes, intuitive eating is a great place to start. But where would you suggest if somebody's listening to this and they're like, wow, I really do want to connect with myself and my body more. I'm going to live more intuitively. What can
Yeah,
they do?
totally. Yeah, it's such a great question because it can seem so vague and daunting. And I'm so big on action steps. Like, what could
Yes.
I actually do to move towards this? So, something I use with my clients in the beginning of our time together is I actually start them connecting to their body unrelated to food,
Mm.
because it's like cross training for intuitive eating. So, for an example, would be to, and it's going to sound underwhelming, but the action step I like to use is to literally just notice your body. So that might look like, you're walking to work or you're walking, somewhere to do an errand, and you have a moment of being like, oh, like my legs are taking me here, like what does that feel like, what is the motion of like one leg forward leaping off into the next one, and like just noticing the act of walking. Or maybe this is a really funny one to some people, but I think it's a really beautiful example of a time to notice your body is when you're using the bathroom, especially for the first time in the morning. I don't know why, but that feels like somehow ritualistic to me. Either going pee or you're excreting waste, like kind of having that moment of just like maybe not being on your phone, because I know it can be hard to not be on your phone when you're on the toilet, but of just kind of like how I describe it to my clients is like practicing rolling your eyeballs into your head, like back into your head, and just like getting curious about what's going on in there. Like, oh, okay, like this is how it feels leading up to when I have to pee. This is pressure in my bladder, and then up there's this release. Like interesting, like literally just noticing, and that being the whole thing, because that will help like the metaphor you're giving kind of start flexing the muscle of dropping in.
Mm.
And it's the kind of thing, the more you use it, the more reflexive it becomes. And there's one question that can be really helpful if that's too vague for you. If you're like, I just have to notice, like that feels kind of like maybe not accessible for me for some reason. A question that I learned from, I'm a certified intuitive eating counselor. So a question that I learned from that training, which I love so much and I use with my clients, is, I'll ask you, Molly. There's a question and there's three possible answers. These are the only three possible answers. So the question is, how are you feeling in your body right now? Pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral?
Mm. I'm feeling neutral right now.
Okay. And what, from the time I asked it to the time you gave me that answer, what did you do to derive that answer?
I kind of just checked in with like what's been going on and how my body feels in this moment. Like I've been sick the last 3 days, and I've been muting myself a lot on this podcast so I can blow my nose. But I no longer feel unpleasant, right? Like I knew what it felt like this weekend to feel unpleasant, and there's still a little bit of unpleasantness, but for the most part, in this moment on this podcast, I feel neutral.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
that's
So
it.
that's and it's as simple as that. Like you said, you kind of checked in. So the beautiful thing about that question is, first of all, the answer doesn't matter. Like there's nothing
Mm.
morally better about answering pleasant versus neutral or unpleasant. The answer doesn't matter. What matters is that moment, that space when you check in, drop in, roll your eyeballs back into your head, flex the muscle of dropping in, whatever you want to call it, to consider what the answer is. That's the moment that matters. And so that question can be a helpful way to manually sort of flex the muscle of dropping in.
I love both of those tools, and I love that you like called out that like this might seem underwhelming to you, but it's part of the process, right? These little tiny nuances are so important. Like as soon as you started talking about like tuning into your body, I touched this mug and like the handle was cold, but my hand was warm, and I felt that like contrast, right? And
Mm,
even on my walk this morning, it's snowing here in Chicago today, and I love putting my face up to the snow, even if it's just for a second. Like I'm totally that neighbor walking my dogs with my face up to the sky, letting the snow hit it. Or like if it's drizzling, like I'm that person. And so those little moments of connecting to your body are so grounding to your nervous system. And I think there's a lot of people who their nervous system is on such high alert from diet culture because we're living in a black or white world. Either I'm really, really good or I'm really, really bad. And what I'm really hearing in this tool that's the question, right? How are you feeling in your body? Pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral? If you were to ask yourself this question a ton throughout the day, you would probably notice that you mostly feel neutral. And that was one of my biggest learnings just in this whole process, maybe not even necessarily intuitive eating, is that we focus so much on the black or white when really a lot of our life is neutral. And if we can hold space for that neutrality, that's the space where more things can come into our existence, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Diet culture, black or white, all or nothing, kind of like these dualities, and it leaves no space for multiple realities to exist at once, or multiple conflicting feelings, like kind of this nuance or gray area that is what real life is actually like.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I love this conversation. And usually, like I said, I usually close with the question, like, what did you gain? But what I want to close with today is some of our favorite client stories of them learning how to be their authentic self. I have a couple in mind. Do you have a couple in mind?
Yeah, I have two. I have two go-tos.
Same. Me too. You go first.
Okay. So the first one that comes to mind for me is a client who, at the time we started working together, they were in a job that they were very much overworked, undervalued, kind of, it was not a great work environment at all. And by the time they came through my program and they had decided, I think it happened a little bit after the main kind of bulk of the program, they decided that they were going to start figuring out going back to school to give themselves some more options, because the career path that they were in was a bit limited in the job opportunities. And this was really scary for them, like going back to school. And that to me was just like such a powerful example of how they knew before doing the work that on some deep level, they knew that this job was, they were undervalued and overworked, but that creature inside of them was asleep. So that creature like couldn't really communicate that to them. And then as a product of waking up that creature to, do the work of intuitive eating, it was like they couldn't ignore it. This job is not right, or was not right for them. And I'm so proud of this human being. They are currently in school for, to head down a career path that feels more aligned for them and opens up more opportunities, which is just so exciting. So that's story number one. The other one's pretty quick, I would say. A client who was in a pretty long-term relationship, and after moving through the work, a similar experience, had that they used to be whispers that were really quiet and almost impossible to hear, but they became more clear. And she had this moment of like not being able to ignore it, like you with your partner, where it was like, okay, hi, we need to speak up. Those voices were just impossible to ignore. And in her case, obviously completely different in your case, the voices were ultimately leading her to ending things in that relationship. And it was long term. They lived together, and she's like in a part of her life where like maybe it was less acceptable to end things. And I got to see her kind of come through the other side and really expand into her most authentic self. And those are my two, I think, main stories that come up. And I think it's just such a beautiful, clear example of how intuitive eating opens the door for you to step into your most authentic life.
Yeah. Oh, and what I hear so much from both of those stories is so much courage.
Yeah.
Like they both were doing big, scary things. And I think it's when we're taught from diet culture that we're wrong and we need to stay in this box and blah, blah, blah. It's so easy to hear those whispers and say, no. Nope.
Yep.
Nope.
So beyond courage, I hear really self-trust. Like my body can be trusted. These voices can be trusted, because we don't trust those whispers in diet culture, because if we're hungry, but our calorie counting app says, sorry, you don't have any more calories, then we tell our hunger cues, no, you're not going to eat. So of course our body stops trusting us.
Yeah. Oh yeah. The courage, the self-trust, so beautiful and so inspiring. And that's why I wanted to share these, is because I think so often in not that this is marketing, this is information, but I think people are kind of tired of hearing the pain points and hearing, oh, this is what's wrong. But like, here's what can happen. It's so exciting.
I'd love to hear your client stories or your stories.
Yes. So, one of my favorites, and these are both like pretty simple little things, but I see them as really big. So I had this one client who she kind of constantly felt like her needs weren't getting met. And during our work together, she had realized that she actually didn't have clarity on what her needs were. She just always felt disappointed in relationships with friends, family members, partners. She was always just feeling let down. And so a lot of the work that we did together was get really clear on like, okay, well, what do you need, right? Like, what do you need in these relationships to help you feel fulfilled and vibrant and thriving? And so this was after we had worked together, but I saw we had chatted about it and she was like, yeah, this was like really a result of the groundwork of work that we did together. It was her 40th birthday and she was really tired of like her birthdays being kind of lackluster and people not planning things for her. And she planned this blowout 40th birthday party for herself because she was like, I deserve this. This is what I want. I want this birthday party. And she called on her friends to like, you know, do these little different parts of it. She planned the bulk of it, but they brought in, you know, their gifts, not physical gifts, but like their gifts of like their friendship into the space. And it was so cool to see, even just via social media. There was so much joy, there was so much play, there was so much celebration. And so that's one of my favorite stories to tell because it has nothing to do with food or body and all about knowing your needs and asking for support. And that can be so hard.
And also initiating, like getting clear on, I want a big, you know, birthday party if that's what you want. Okay, like I can initiate that and get my needs met by like calling on my friends to support what I know I need.
Yes. So that is one of my favorite stories.
I love that.
She also just has so many other fun wins and stories, but that's one of my favorites because like that's you living your life, right? Knowing what you want, asking for it, making it happen, and just enjoying it. So that's one of my favorite stories. And then one of my second favorite stories is, again, nothing to do with food or body really. My client was a teacher and she often just felt like, you know, as a teacher, you're always being observed, right? So she was always self-conscious of like, what are people thinking of me, whether it's students, coworkers, parents, whatever it is. And she also noticed that like, within this fear of judgment from others, she also judged other people, right? Like, oh, this person's too loud or outgoing or blah, blah, blah. And so she started a new job. And in the first few days, she noticed this huge shift. She was like, I noticed the person who was louder and more outgoing, and I honored them instead of judged them. I was like, oh, you're just being you. And that's okay. And she was like, and I also felt confident being my authentic self. Usually it takes me like a while to lay that groundwork of like, okay, I can be my authentic self or not. And she was like, no, I'm always safe to be my authentic self. So I just was myself from the beginning. And she was like, it made the process of starting a new job so much easier and smoother. And it just felt lighter. And so that's one of my favorite stories too, because it's those little moments, like that's a little big moment, you know?
Right. That's so beautiful. And I think the piece about sort of projecting your judgments, if you're afraid that you're too much or, you know, you're too loud, whatever it is, then you're going to see that in other people. And it's such a beautiful ripple of doing this work is that it helps you not judge other people in this way that also feels inauthentic because she probably was like, ew, why am I judging this person? That's not me.
Yes.
But also couldn't control it on some level.
Yes, absolutely. So those are two of my favorite stories. And what I love from all of these stories is like, again, it's not like, oh, I, you know, only ate one piece of pie or I stopped when I was full. Like those things are wins too. Not you can eat more than one piece of pie. Right. Let me be clear.
Yes.
But like it's that the work that you do with intuitive eating and body image goes beyond intuitive eating and body image and impacts the rest of your life. And like you said, with your clients, the amount of self-trust and self-knowing and courage that comes from this is, whew, Chef's kiss.
It could not have said it better. That I think that is the true beauty of this work. Like you said, being able to honor your cues, the pie, like those are all amazing wins. I think this kind of conversation really captures almost the wins you wouldn't expect when you enter into this work.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, Leah, this has been such a beautiful conversation. And I want us to wrap up, but I always like to ask my guests, like, what is one thing that's like really on your heart that you're wanting to share with the people listening, whether it's from this conversation today or just like something you're like, I'm really feeling called to share this. What do you want to share with people?
Oh my God.
Molly, casual questions.
Like in the world of this work and intuitive eating, or like beyond?
Whatever you're feeling called to tell people.
What am I feeling called to tell people? Oh my gosh. I think it's that if you have found yourself listening to this somehow and connected to Molly, connected to me, and you've been considering really fully diving into this work, you've maybe been like gleaning pieces of Instagram content and maybe TikTok videos on intuitive eating and just kind of like piecing together little learnings and information where you can, but you're just like not seeing the progress, transformation, or you're hearing this, but you're like, I'm just like not there and I need support. I think if you're in that boat, what I want to share is the power of having someone walk you through all of this and really support you and empower you with the tools and counseling that you need is really can be incredibly valuable. So what I want to share then is just, if you've been considering fully diving into this work for some time, but have held yourself back in some way, I want you to know that it's safe. It's going to be scary, but it's safe to dive into something new. And that in itself is intuition. If you keep coming back to it, but you haven't like fully let yourself into it, listen to those whispers.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And what I'm getting from that too is like, you don't have to do this alone. Like there is support out there that's going to help you, whether, it's hiring a coach or a dietitian or going to a therapist or even like getting a friend to really dive in deep with this. So with that, Leah, where can people find you?
Yes. Instagram. It's just Leah, Leah Kern, KERN.RD. And I have a website. Websites are weird. Like who uses a website? But no, actually it has some, 2 powerful pieces on it, and, a place you can go for like book recs, all the studies on intuitive eating, if that's something you ever felt interested in or called to like understand more on, and, some videos of client stories. So talking about like what me and Molly were just sharing, clients who have kind of been very open and graciously willing to share their stories. There's a few videos linked on my website, or you can, if hearing these client stories helps you feel less alone or inspired, you can go there and learn some more about what the healing journey looks like on different people's lives.
Yeah, I love that. So we'll definitely include that in the show notes. Leah, thank you so much for being here. This was such a beautiful conversation. I'm sure people listening are feeling so inspired by what their future could look like.
Yes, it was so wonderful, Molly. I'm so glad we got to do it.
If you enjoyed this episode, if it inspired you, if you learned something, it would mean so much to me if you rated it and reviewed it. And if you feel called to, share it with someone who it might resonate with. You can find me on Instagram at leahkern.rd. You can also join my weekly newsletter by visiting leahkernrd.com. And I'll see you next week.